Welcome back to the Beauty and Bearded Beast channel. I'm Brian.
I'm Rain.
Today we are going to be starting a new series. Trying to figure out how we're going to do it. Kind of right now we're planning on it being a 10-part series. What we're going to be doing is covering basically the last century of music, starting with the 1920s and working our way up. But as I think about it more and more, I think it's probably going to have to evolve a little bit more than that, because I don't think once we get to 60s, 70s, 80s, and on, as the music itself grows and expands, I don't think we're going to be able to cover that in single episodes like we are going to be on this one. But we'll see, and we'll see how it takes off. We'll see how much y'all like it, and how we decide to go from there. But to kick things off, basically, like I said, we're going to be covering all the decades. We're going to start with the 1920s, which is basically referred to as the really the beginning of the modern era of music. And it's pretty much agreed upon, just because that was when the recording process actually went from acoustic to electrical. And when this happened, this gave music recording a better sound, a more natural sound, and that's when more people actually started listening to recording music. And when that took off, that's when you actually started to see independent record labels start to rise in the late 1920s. And with the rise of record labels, you actually saw more attention to bands. They were actually taking better risks. They were giving more attention to artists that usually probably wouldn't get attention, because prior to that, the only way to really make a name for yourself was through live music, and you had to really know somebody. You had to be really talented, just to really get your name out there. So a lot of people really did get overlooked because of that. So when recorded music came about in the 20s, that's when more people got the opportunity to be bigger. Just like we're seeing now. With the rise of the internet, a lot more people became bigger because of that platform. Also in the 20s, I guess technically in the 19 teens, is when the first public radio came about as well. During this time, they were playing some music. A lot of it was news and things like that. But then in 1923, this American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers started requiring license fees in order to play their music on the radio. This was the first time that artists actually started making money from their music being played on the radio. So all in all, this whole gathering of technology, this era really developed the growth of artists, the growth of what we see as modern music. So what we're gonna do is kind of touch on the really three main divisions of music at the time, which was dance, jazz, and blues. I guess we'll start with dance. The alcohol prohibition pretty much started in the 1920s. This let a lot of people go into music venues, social gatherings, things of that nature. And this saw the growth of what is later referred to as speakeasies. These speakeasies were a place where people could actually go secretly drink, because alcohol was not allowed. And in these places, they had dance music. They had artists that would come play, and this was really the big place where people would learn how to do dances and things of that nature. And this was a significant part of the culture back then. I'm sure you've seen videos of times with people dancing in the 20s. We're going to play one here in a few. It's the Black Bottom Dance. But it was really the foundation. These dance bands. This is, like I said, the foundation of what was become classic pop standards. through the 40s, 50s, and so on, even what we see today. Some of the videos we're going to be playing, I'm not going to be playing them all the way through. We're just going to be playing, I don't know, 30-second clips just to kind of get a feel for what it is. Otherwise, this may take just entirely too long. But like I said, we're going to show first this dance. This was the Black Bottom dance. This was really, really popular. I think this followed up the Charleston and really became like the dance of the 20s. So we're going to go to that first. So yeah, that was the Black Bottom dance. Very orchestrated, very. I mean, you can almost see where like line dancing and things came from this culture. But this was big. This was the thing to do at the time. Um, Next up, and probably more thoroughly, is jazz. Jazz was pretty much like the epitome of music at the time. Uh, Jazz really started in the early 1900s by black communities in New Orleans. Really, really big and popular at the time. Um, it's pretty much associated with Jelly Roll Morton as the guy that started jazz. Historians seem to pretty well pinpoint like he was the one that really started it. He was obviously a major pivotal figure in early jazz. He actually composed the first jazz composition in 1915 called the Jelly Roll Blues. I think I have something we're going to listen to from him, but we'll get that in just a few minutes. As far as pertaining to the 1920s, that's when jazz really took off. The 1920s are commonly referred to as the Jazz Age, just because jazz had such a major cultural impact. I mean, across everything, fashion, dance, youth culture, race relations. It even kind of was associated with the accepted moral standards of the time. It really was the defining, for sure, music of the era, but really, I mean, everything of the era really revolved around jazz. Pretty much the major figures of jazz, like I said, were Jelly Roll Morton. He was a big one. He had a band called the Red Hot Peppers. I don't know. Does anybody know? Leave a comment in the comments below. I don't know. Did the Red Hot Chili Peppers pull anything from this? Were they influenced by Jelly at all? I'm curious to hear that. I don't know. But Louis Armstrong was a major black artist at the time. He was probably the most well-known jazz musician of the time. He was highly trained from a young age. He was a virtuoso, pretty much. He just picked it up and he just played it so well. We are going to listen to something from him. And kind of the counterpart to that was Bix Beiderbecke. He was a white jazz musician, and he was never really taught. He just taught himself. And in teaching himself, he actually kind of brought a whole new style to jazz. And this was actually met with some opposition by black communities, just because this was cultural appropriation of sorts, but it worked, and he was good at it. So let's see. First, I think we're gonna listen to a little bit of Jelly Roll and just kind of get a feel for him. Then we'll go to Louis Armstrong and Bix Beiderbecke and just kind of get a feel for their styles as well. So, Jelly Roll Morton. What does that make you think of?
I'm not sure.
I don't really know how much old cartoons, like Looney Tunes and stuff, you watched.
Like Tom and Jerry.
Yeah, like when they were in like the saloons and things like that. I mean, they really did take a lot of that from that time. Every time I hear music like this, I think of that.
That's what I first thought.
Really? Alright. Next, we will jump to Louis Armstrong's, I think this is going to be West End Blues. This is probably one of his bigger songs at the time. We'll get right to that and see how that differs or similar. Yeah, I was curious if Louis would actually come in on that. it's really kind of what he was pretty well known for, is that, I mean, not really even saying anything, but just his voice basically creating another instrument. Kind of just like what he was doing. Definitely a little bit slower pace. A little more, I don't know how to say it. Almost kind of like how Tool does, how they bring in different instruments and just kind of build up to a overall sound. I don't know. I enjoy that. I'd be curious to actually, especially now in my older age, kind of really sit down and listen to a lot more of Louis Armstrong. Might actually appreciate it now. I know I never really cared for jazz, things of this nature at the time. I don't expect you to.
No.
It's an acquired taste. But it's also at the same time, it's good to know. It's good to appreciate just where music has developed. It's going to be really cool just to see over these next few weeks, like, how we see music develop, because you will see direct parallels from the 20s to the 30s to the 30s to the 40s, the 40s to the 50s, and like how that music just slowly develops with time. Just be fun for all of us to see. Alright, next we're gonna do the Bix Beiderbecke Riverboat Shuffle. Let's see how that differs from both Jelly and Louis Armstrong. Like I said, this was the white artist, and he supposedly brought a different style. Me personally, I'm not familiar with him. I don't know that I've ever heard anything by him, so I'm curious to hear how this may differ from the black artist of the time. So we'll get right to that.
Reminds me of a Christmas song that I've heard.
Like, almost seemed like it's from like a Christmas movie or something. You can definitely hear his unusual style, as people have referred to him as. I definitely get it. What was he playing in the beginning? Was that like a guitar he was strumming at the same time? That was a cool blend, I guess. Definitely different. He was really interesting. I'll probably actually dig more into really all three of them and just kind of get a feel for their music. I know And y'all may say in the comments, I mean, you can't really do justice by any of this by listening to 30 seconds to a minute of it. I totally understand that. I'm just trying to get just a feel for it. Just kind of show the younger crowd, just roughly what this was about. Just kind of get an idea of where all this came from. Without boring them too much. Next, we'll get into the blues. The blues pretty much started in the early 1900s. A lot of people believe that probably it began earlier than that, just because of what it was. It pretty well started in the African American communities in the southern states. 1920s blues is really characterized by repeating chords, really focused on 12-bar structure. And it just chronicled the singer's personal troubles and the daily racial struggles associated with African Americans living in the South, living in prejudice and segregated areas. Because at this time, this is a very short period after slavery had been abolished. A lot of places were still segregated. I mean, really for another 50 years. I mean, you had places where only black people could go and only white people could go. Black people could only use certain fountains. White people could only use certain fountains. It was a very harsh place to live for, especially for African Americans. And this music was really... It was pretty much exclusively played by black musicians at the time, really only popular within black communities. It wasn't until later years that you actually started to see the white community start to embrace it a little bit more. Ma Rainey, pretty much the mother of blues. She's probably one of the biggest people that really came from it, along with Mamie Smith and some others. But I think what we're going to listen to is Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, if I'm not mistaken. And she was actually one of the very first artists to ever be recorded singing the blues. So we'll kind of get a feel of what the blues are and what it really was at the time. We may listen to a little bit more just to kind of get some of the lyrical aspects of this, just kind of get an idea of what she was singing. We'll get right to that. Okay, maybe we won't get to Ma Rainey.
Can't find it.
I don't know where it went. Look real fast one more time. If it didn't go somewhere else. There it is.
Down there.
Alright. We'll get to it.
Are you heard the rest? Ah, boy, I'm going to show you the best. Ma Rainey's going to show you her black bottom. Way down in South in Alabama, I got a friend called Dancing Sammy, who's crazy about all the ladies dancing, black bottom stomp and you baby fencing. The other night at a trailer fair, soon as the boys found out that I was there, he said, come on, Lord, let's go to the cabaret. When I got there, you ought to hear me say, want to see the dance you call the black bottom. to see the dancer call your big black bottom. They put her in a dance. All the boys in the neighborhood, they say your black bottom is really good. Come on and show me your black bottom. I wanna learn that dance. I wanna see the dancer call the black bottom. I wanna learn that dance. Come on and show the dancer call your big black bottom. Then put them in my pants. Early last morning, bottom.
So, a lot of this I've really just kind of been reading up on. Maybe somebody that knows the time a little bit better can help me understand. I know the blues were pretty exclusively African American at this time. I've noticed this black bottom trend across a lot of the music at this time. I guess across jazz and across blues. And like we saw in that video earlier, the black bottom dance obviously picked up by white people. When did this merge? Was this late 20s? Is that totally coincidental? Did either of those have anything to do with the other? I'm curious to know that. That kind of caught me off guard there. I don't know. Let me know. I'm curious. The other thing we'll just kind of touch on just briefly, as far as music goes, Broadway musicals at the same time, pretty much late 20s, really became a place where creativity and decadence just thrived. This is really when they started to become real big, right after, what do they call them, talkies, which were the movies at the time that were just really starting to get big. Broadway's became a place where talented performers, composers, writers, musicians all just kind of came together to create a new art. And it was really the first time that had happened. And, well, to an extent, I mean, you could say theater and things of that nature kind of did the same thing prior, but this was a new thing, and it really kind of helped music grow. But that's really all I have to say. I'm sure you could go on for another hour about the influence of the 1920s, but I really kind of think that really touches on the bulk of it. I mean, we've spent 25 minutes talking about it, so I think we'll kind of wrap it up there. Did you learn something?
No.
I mean, just the history. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing to pick from it. But yeah, if you like what you saw, leave thumbs up, comments below. Let us know what you think about this idea, going further, 30s, 40s, and so on. What would you like to see different if you do like this? But let us know in the comments below. We'll be reading them and keeping up and talking with you. But hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Thumbs up, like I said. Hit the bell, get notifications from us. And until next time, we will see y'all later.
Bye.